Hello, and welcome to our present PowerPoint presentation on hunter-gatherer societies to sedentary societies. In the era of human beginnings to sedentary societies, humans moved from an egalitarian hunter-gatherer model of society to an organized bureaucracy which created a class hierarchy. However, through this time period, the big man remains the leader of the kin, or extended family, and people's decisions are largely based off of changes in nature rather than free will. This shift allowed for a food surplus and new technologies but created a class hierarchies and gender inequalities that exist to this day. Human beginnings in Africa, however, the Little Ice Age forced hunter-gatherer societies to the warmer Middle Eastern regions. Hunter-gatherer societies were egalitarian and women were equal to men. However, humans were reliant upon nature because of animal migration patterns. As humans moved to the Middle East, they became either pastoralists, who were nomadic peoples that domesticated animals and herded them around the countryside, or they became agricultural and settled down into sedentary societies to create a food surplus. The first big sedentary society we will talk about is the Mesopotamian city-states. As humans settled down into agricultural societies, they had to settle down by rivers, by the two main rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. Many city-states formed here. The first bureaucracies were formed in order to give the nobles land rights and organize irrigation projects. The region could not unify under this time period because the unpredictable flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates made it difficult to unify agricultural-based peoples without good technologies. The hierarchy created, however, marginalized women to the house for childbearing and gave them inferior status opposed to their status in hunter-gatherer societies. The religion in this area depicted the gods as mean and unpredictable due to the unpredictable flooding. Similar to Mesopotamia, Egypt formed along a river called the Nile. However, in Egypt rule was centralized because of the predictable flooding of the Nile River. A class hierarchy was then set up in order to give the pharaoh and nobles land and organize irrigation projects. However, women were marginalized for childbearing. The gods in Egypt were nicer and more predictable than Mesopotamia because of the predictability of the Nile River flooding. Another very important group to remember is the Bantu tribes. The Bantu tribes migrated from Central to Eastern Africa. They brought the Swahili language and iron to the eastern African coast. They also formed city-states that allowed for a diffusion of their advancements, which created new and more efficient weapons and tools for war and agriculture. They also eventually set up the Indian trade route in later periods. In China, the Xia were a mythological dynasty of disunified villages. However, the Zhang were the first dynasty, and they started the practice of ancestor worship, which lays the roots for traditional Confucianism in later times. In these societies, the question comes up, did humans have free will, or were their actions determined by nature? It is important to remember, in hunter-gatherer and sedentary societies, decisions were based upon reactions to rivers and animal migration patterns, not their own free will. Religions, bureaucracies, and even the switched and sedentary societies were a result of the Little Ice Age and game scarcity. In addition, war was fought over resources and a need for food surplus due to the diminishing food supply. Now we will talk about economics and technology. In hunter-gatherer societies, there was no real trade route due to the isolation of groups with each other. In sedentary societies, trade was among the nobles and merchants between other city-states or villages, using their agricultural surplus. They also used iron to create the plow and other farming tools, as well as stronger weapons and armor for waging war. The ideology practiced at the time were pantheism and animism. The belief was that the gods were manifested in animals and nature. In hunter-gatherer societies, they viewed Moan as equal due to their belief in Mother Earth. However, in sedentary societies, they moved to a belief in the river gods. This switch also meant the societies needed women to reproduce, so the Mother Earth belief was lost. In hunter-gatherer societies, it was an egalitarian society where everyone's role was respected and necessary. There was no leader, but a chief or big man that ran the tribe, making decisions based on either group consent or through a group of elders who guided the tribe. In sedentary societies, the big man was still prevalent, but the societies became patriarchal, and a class system was formed in order to manage irrigation projects and protect nobles' land. Women became housebound and were used for reproduction rather than viewed as equal. In hunter gatherer societies, wars were fought over resources and the honor of the leader. The kin in hunter gatherer societies and other tribes were viewed as non human, as shown in the cave paintings in France. The societies had a big man with a charismatic personality that ruled the society. This idea of a big man continues throughout the sedentary societies. But wars in sedentary societies were fought over land, resources, and the control of water for trade and farming. Throughout the hunter gatherer to sedentary time period, family or kin were how society was organized. Big men led the people with charisma. Early bureaucracy was then made in order to manage irrigation systems and give nobles land rights. But we see a loss of egalitarian society to patriarchal society in the switch. We also see that religions reflect what each society believed as seen in the women's roles. These societies also fit perfectly into the argument of geographical determinism because decisions were based on reactions to nature, not free will.